Hitman 2-3, this is Hitman 2. What's the status? Over. 2-3, stand by. Goliath, this is 2 Bravo. Request permission to engage enemy paratroopers and attempt to snatch a grid Papa uniform 259er, 119er. Break. Enemy is unaware.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Ben Powers coming at you from the Commander's Voice. And once again, we have friend of the show, Nick Jacobellis, back with us with another chapter. We're coming up on sort of the climax of the exciting time he had as a customs agent down in Florida during the late 80s, early 90s. So, Nick, welcome back.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here again.
So as everybody knows, we're talking about controlled delivery. I've got my copies of the books. It's a 2-volume set right here, available at fine bookstores everywhere, I imagine. We order it through Amazon, or how else can we get our hands on it, Nick?
Amazon and Kindle.
Very cool. And you can see Nick's got it right behind you as well. Several of Nick's books are right behind him. Nick is an author of now up to 13 books. His latest book is a work of fiction that's about customs officers in the early 20th century working the southern border between Mexico and the United States during the Mexican Revolution, which also sounds super exciting. What's the title of that one, Nick?
I started that one, actually. I wrote a screenplay in 2000 and I wanted to convert it to a book. So one of the retired customs special agents in charge helped me a great deal with some research because I wanted to make it historical fiction. I didn't want it to just be complete fiction. So we got our hands on a bunch of newspaper clippings and whatnot and put a story together about these 2 customs mounted inspectors at the time. And the titles were a little bit different and the agency structure was a little bit different, but the mission was the same. And they're working the border, working informants, and end up in Columbus, New Mexico, when the Pancho Villa and 500 of his rebels raid the border town, which was a port of entry. And the U.S. Army 13th Cavalry was there, like 300 and some odd troops, did a phenomenal job with the local law enforcement people, including customs officers that were there.
That's just an amazing story. It's a fascinating time. I'm just picturing Lee Marvin and the Professionals.
Yeah, right.
That time period. So super exciting, and we'll have to keep an eye out for that book as well. But we are talking about controlled delivery right now. So if you've hung out with us this far with Nick telling his story, he's operating on the front lines of the drug wars in the 80s, early 90s down in Florida. He comes up with this concept that they can actually fund ongoing operations by confiscating property from criminals, and using that to fund subsequent operations. And they've coordinating with air operations, working with the Navy, working with the Air Force, working with the Coast Guard. And after a while, as we sort of alluded to in our last discussion, the bad guys start figuring out what you're doing a little bit. That you can only react to as they're changing their tactics. So, Nick, I know you guys had a lot of success with air interdiction after a while, but there was a certain target that you guys were really interested in, and it sounded like air interdiction wasn't going to work. And so all of a sudden, Agent Jacobellis gets himself a private Navy, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited to jump right into it. So, sir, the floor is yours.
In 1989, in July, until June of 1990, we worked a case with our agents in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They picked up a smuggler pilot who agreed to cooperate, and he was looking at a good time in the Crowbar Hotel if he didn't produce. This guy was a talker. He was really good. I ended up naming him the salesman because he could sell snowballs in hell. This guy was that good. And he had real bad guys that wanted to meet him. It was very cloak and dagger, like there'd be a letter ripped in half and you had to have one half of the letter, and other people did the same thing. They'd rip a dollar bill in half and send it to one guy. And when you met him in a hotel or in a restaurant undercover, you'd have to show him the other half, just like in some spy movies. I mean, it was very creative stuff. Anyway, things go well. The bad guys are coming up with all kinds of expense money that we call front money because they put it up front before the deal was consummated completely. And they gave us enough to pay for initial transportation fees. We go to the system, our Uncle Sam, about 6 times for country clearance, which is a formal request for us to basically go into a source country in an undercover capacity using contract personnel to pick up a load of contraband. In this case, it was going to be 750 kilos of cocaine.
And which country was this one you're trying to get clearance for?
Colombia. Now, as you know from previous episodes, there were times we flew into a jungle airstrip. There's another time we land in a lagoon right off the coast, and we get clearance for this stuff. Another time we put in to get clearance to land off the coast, and it's no deal. You can't do that. So these rules of engagement are constantly, it's not definitive. It's not in stone, like every operation can be run a certain way. So we always have to change according to what our Uncle Sam will allow us to do. So in this particular case, after the sixth time, or in the fifth or sixth time, I said, look, we'd be in the undercover office and the phone would ring at almost midnight and it'd be country clearance denied. Well, the crew's in the aircraft, the engines are turning, they're ready to go. And I got to go out there and go like, cut, it's over. So after all these attempts, I said, well, let's try to land in the water. They said, well, you can't land over here, where it would be safe, but you can land 12 miles offshore. And I'm going, well, this plane can maybe make the landing, but it may not take off. These aircraft were used by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, especially during the Vietnam War, to extract pilots that were shot down. They were used during the Cold War to land in the open ocean. And some of these planes had to be towed by a Navy destroyer back to safe harbor because they could get in, but they couldn't get out. Well, we can't have a Navy destroyer show up and tow a plane full of cocaine if there's bad guys on board. And we didn't always know when the bad guys were going to say, we're coming back with you.
Roger.
So in this particular story, we decide to try twice and keep the deal in motion. And the bad guys keep sending us money. So we go to Borinquen, Puerto Rico. That's where the Customs Air Unit was located. We get to Borinquen. A long story short, we fly to Rosie Roads Naval Air Station to brief an AWAC crew. I figured we'd go there, meet a commanding officer, colonel, maybe an intel officer, give them a quick briefing, give them a copy of the op plan, and go back to Borinquen and launch with their support. So we're on a bus going through the base, and it's obviously highly secure, and we look like pirates with beards and ponytails, and there's two spit and polish Air Force pilots on board the bus being brought out there. And we're just showing our credentials to the Air Force Security Forces personnel, and they're like waving us through. We get to the hangar, and it's filled with colonels and all kinds of personnel, so we brief them. We leave. I think everything's going to be fine. We hit the PX and buy a few things and head back to Borinquen. Bottom line is we launch. We launched twice. And on one of the midnight launches, I get a phone call on a Stu 3 phone. I got to run back to the customs office. And there's an Air Force major going like, what's this airdrop Operation Aruba? I'm going, what? We're not airdropping anything. I said, we're picking up a load in the ocean. I don't know anything about this. I said, well, look, how many colonels do I have to brief before, bye, have a nice day. And by the time I got to the hangar, my partner, Mike R., Vietnam Marine combat vet, he's sending the plane south. Well, we had told our crew, don't risk landing in the open ocean if you're going to get yourself killed or hurt or end up stranded. It's not worth it. The bad guys had coordinates 12 miles offshore. Sure enough, the boat shows up 2 days in a row, but it's an overcast sky. It's very cloudy, bad conditions, very choppy. I told them, tell these guys on the 2-meter radio, you've been flying around too long, you used up too much fuel. You'll have to do this another way. After the second attempt, and it doesn't work, they RTB back to Borinquen. We go home. We go to a restaurant. We're sitting at a long table, kind of in a private section in Dade County, and eating buckets of chicken wings, which was one of our 4 food group: pizza, chicken wings, Cuban food, which we loved, and Chinese food. So we're sitting there at the table, and there's people drinking soda and a pitcher of beer and whatnot. And I'm really fed up with this 6 times in a year. So I lean forward and I go, we're going by boat. The salesman's sitting at the other end of the table. And he says to me, what about our motto? We fly at night if the price is right. We're the man for your contraband, 1 plane in, 1 plane out, last call. I said, well, we're still going to use the seaplane. But what we're going to do is we're going by boat to pick this load up because the boat's going to make it through rough water, hopefully. And then we're going to take this load back to safe harbor, which would be off the coast of Puerto Rico. We picked the Mona Passage. And we'll transfer the load to the seaplane and fly cross country to New Mexico and make the delivery to the buyers from California. Not a problem. Sounds simple. So we call up the bad guys and they tell us that they want to put 2 people on board. That kind of changes things. Call our bosses, they go, yeah, go ahead, no problem. Now we got to go rent the boat. So fortunately, our air smuggling investigation unit at Homestead Air Force Base, co-located with Customs Air Operations, was also co-located with the Miami Marine Unit, which was run by a customs agent by the name of Joe Goulet. I asked him if I could use his name. He's a great guy, character, and an outstanding vessel commander. Jimmy Eleanor was another vessel commander, and the way we worked this deal out was we had to go rent the boat. Joe used his contacts, and this is what I brought up in past. This is all happening because agents in the field are making contacts in the legitimate community. Headquarters is not involved. No one from headquarters is calling us up going, let me make your life easy and get you an undercover vessel. No one in headquarters is calling up going, let me make your life easy and get you an undercover aircraft. No one in headquarters is approving our request. Hey, I seized a plane that we can use in this mission. No. We're going to auction that off. Oh, so you're going to auction this plane off for 50 grand, 100 grand, but I'm going to pay somebody 20 or 40 grand a pop to rent their plane. Let's do the math. So we're doing this on our own, locally, through our own contacts. And Joe Goulet knows who to go to. We got ourselves a 100-foot work boat with an aluminum hull. It's kind of, they call it a wet boat, I think. It had windows that didn't open. It was air conditioned. That's another story. And we provisioned this thing from Sam's Club or wherever we went, whatever they call Sam's Club. Before it was Sam's Club, and fill up the boat and put in. There's no. We put in an operational plan, but there's no request for country clearance because we're only going 12 miles offshore. This is our own operation now. So our bosses, bless it, go ahead, have a nice trip. So I go home that night, and I'm not really sure I'm going to tell my wife that I'm going along. She probably thinks I'm just going to go to Gitmo and wave goodbye when the crew takes off on the boat. So I was very concerned about my sons. One was 8, one was 4 at the time. And, they're listening to these phone calls at 8, 9 o'clock at night. They're hearing me talk all the time. Agents are coming over my house. We're having barbecues. These are not, as parents, we don't realize what our children see us as. We think everything is fine, but we don't put ourselves in our children's shoes. Like, is dad losing his mind? Like, is he going to get killed or what? You don't know what fears they have or phobias. You don't know what they think. So I said, screw it. I'm going to give it a shot. I take this big chart out. I put it on the floor of my oldest son's bedroom. And I say, boys, come here. I want to brief you on this operation. Now, obviously, I'm sanitizing this thing to the nth degree. But they got into it. I said, here we are. I did math problems with them. This is how much fuel we need on the boat. This is what we need on the airplane. It has 2 motors, so you got to double the number. And they're sitting there watching, and I think it made them feel good. And then one of my sons said, he looks at the map and he goes, so you're going to the secret base, right? In Gitmo. He knew Gitmo. He heard me on the phone. I said, yeah. And my little one goes, Dad, is the Navy going to help you? I said, oh, yeah, the Navy's great. They got big guns on their ships and they're going to protect us. And the Coast Guard is going to have a cutter out there and they're going to protect us. So they feel fine. My boys are briefed. They go to bed. I go on my bedroom. I'm packing my bag and I tell my wife, look, I'm going along. And she's not a happy camper. And I said, I can't let other people do something that I wouldn't do. She goes, well, you do that all the time. And I said, I'm going along. This is going to be a great chapter in the book. I'm trying to make light of it, but she's not taking it that way. And it was, if she had a bowl of spaghetti in her hand, I think she would have. It was bad. She was very upset and justifiably so. She hear the word, you're going to Colombia on a boat, this is hurricane season. It's now June of 1990. All these storms are taking place. Anyway, I leave. I'm going anyway. I don't know if I'm coming home, but I'm going. And get down to the boat, and Captain Video shows up with Special Agent Mike R. And Captain Video says to me, you don't have to do this. I said, yes, I do. I'm tired of sending you guys on these maybe one-way missions. Now I'm going, you can worry about me. I said, you just be sure that you're there at the Mona Passage to pick us up on the way back. Next morning, and one of my CIs, Gordo, shows up with his mom and speaking
with his mom
and his kids, and she's praying for the boat. She's actually saying prayers in Spanish and praying for us. to go down there. Well, I told you he worked for Uncle Sam when he was
Right.
younger, so she kind of knew that he did some crazy stuff with the government. And so after they left, we all go on board, we sleep, we wake up at 0600, we take off. Jimmy Eleanor is our vessel commander because Joe Goulet is already running an operation, and we're going to meet him in Gitmo. We don't leave Port Everglades when the AC breaks on this thing. Now we're in a boat with no AC and no windows that open except for a hatch in the forward compartment and a hatch in the rear compartment. So it's rather warm inside. It's like it's just hot, toasty.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So we're to cut to the some of the more exciting stuff because there's so much in the book. We get pretty close to Gitmo, and there's a lot of storms, like I said, tropical storms at sea at night. And I'm sleeping, and we're doing this U.S. Navy 4-on 4-off thing, which I don't know how anybody does 20 years doing this. That kills your body. And people wake you up after 4 hours, and did I just go to sleep? And no, I got to go on watch. Okay, thank you. No, I'm a customs agent. I'm not in the Navy, but this is like a Navy operation now. So we're trying to conform, and that's just the way the Marine guys were. They were committed to this. So I'm laying there on this. They had like these vinyl couches that were not really beds, but I'm laying on this thing, and I look up, and I see waves going by, and it's a storm, and I fall back to sleep. I basically pass out because it's so hot. Wake up the next day, and I go out on deck, and I notice that there's deck line over the side of the boat. I go, no problem, and I go to pull it. It ain't coming up. Mike Kalem, one of the other Marine enforcement officers, comes over. Now the both of us are trying to pull up this deck line. Nothing's coming up. Now the vessel commander comes out. Jimmy, nothing. Jimmy puts on, this is one of the bravest acts of heroism I've ever seen. We are now drifting into Cuban waters. I could tell from looking at the radar scope. This is not international waters anymore. Wow. Engines are off, low overcast sky, cloudy, dark, ominous, and we're drifting into like communist territory. Jimmy puts on his dive gear. We hand him a knife. Mike Kalem and I, we put a secure line around his waist. He goes over the side. He's under the boat. And as this boat is going up and down, it's whacking him in the tank and sending him down deeper. And he's coming up, and he's trying to hack deck line that had ripped open, and the hatches on deck that had the deck line in it ripped open and sent all the deck line over the side. So he's hacking deck line off so that we can make way enough to get to Gitmo.
Right.
Because if you don't, you blow a prop, you're flooding the boat, and it's game over. So he finally comes up and says, I think I got enough off. We can limp into Gitmo. We send a security code to the Navy. Joe Goulet's waiting for us on the Zodiac boat. The Navy, once again, is an unbelievable host. They go to work on this boat as if this was wartime, and we had to go back out on a mission, which was true. We did have to go back out because we have a schedule to meet. The bad guys are waiting for us at a certain time, at a certain set of coordinates. They fix the air conditioning. They make it so cold you can hang meat in this thing. They fix everything and turn this thing into almost a brand new boat. We go to the old club. We grab a couple of hours sleep with clean sheets, leave the next morning. We're on our way south, another storm, really bad. I'm in the wheelhouse with Joe Goulet, and he says, Nicky, why don't you go below and get some sleep? I said, all right. Now, the Windward Passage gets its name, the Windward Passage, because it's so windy, and the way the land masses are, it funnels the wind where the waves are very short and choppy. So when you're sitting in the wheelhouse, your spine is being smashed against the steel bulkhead, and you're doing this for hour after hour after hour. And if you stand up, you're still bouncing around. So it's a very rough ride. So I go down below and get myself thrown against the bulkhead, and finally make it to my bunk. And Mike Kalem, who had been was in the Marine unit, was smart enough to take the lower berth. I had to climb into the top one. And as I'm doing this, it feels like the boat hit a wall of rubber and bounces backwards. And next I hear Joe Goulet call out, all hands on deck. This is not good. Pitch black out. We were in a bad storm, and apparently a rogue wave of some kind came, hit the bow, ripped open the bow hatch, and filled it with seawater. Fortunately, the bow hatch was sealed, so the water didn't come into the rest of the boat, but now we're like this.
Yeah, you've got a ballast situation.
every time the water comes over it's coming over the bow. So Special Agent Chuck W., who is one of my partners in the beginning, breaks out the one and only pump we have on this SS Minnow and cranks it up and it dies. Now we have no pump. So we have one puke bucket on board. So Joe says, we're just going to take 20 bales. We got to try to get some of this water out so that every time this boat bobs up and down, we don't have seawater coming over the front. And if this storm picks up, we're getting into the Zodiac boat, we're going over the side because we can't go forward and we can't go backwards. So we're stuck. Early on when we started, Joe said, Nick, could you be the comms officer for this mission? To be honest with you, I wasn't into radios at all. And I was the lead undercover guy, so I figured I would go along, help. I went to Marine, we had Marine Law Enforcement Officers School of Flexi for a month. Very rigorous. You fail, they toss you out. Learn navigation, steering vessels. You learn the difference that this is deck line. Now, don't call it a rope, you're in trouble. It was very, very demanding months worth of training, and I'm glad I went to it. But I wasn't into radios. So Joe taught me, and because some agents would get on the air and just talk, and I would go 10-4, and that'd be it. And they go to channel 2, and I go, where's channel 2? So I was not technically. How I learned to fly is still being investigated by the FAA. So I go through the motion with Joe. He teaches me how to do it. He says, listen, every 20 minutes, get on the air. I'm going to give you all coordinates. He's out there with a sextant. The guy's phenomenal. And he's like looking at the stars, where like Orion's belt is and figuring out exactly where we are, going back to the chart room, and says to me, these are our coordinates. And I'm sending a coded message on a machine that we had on board the vessel. And I'm broadcasting.
Got it.
Headquarters and Homestead Air Force Base, the Customs R Unit, Group 7, the Air Smuggling Investigative Unit, has the op plan and the code sheet. But it's late at night. Well, there's a listening post, they're all over the place, that hears this crazy coded message, and they start one of our listening posts. I knew where it was. I knew where some of them were. And they start calling up the agencies that were operating in that part of the world, doing all kinds of operations. There was only a couple of outfits that did it. And when they finally got to the Customs Service, they said, hey, we don't know what this means, but this is what this guy's, every 20 minutes they're transmitting. They get the code sheet, they transmit it. Basically, it says, taken on water, seal bow compartment flooded, requesting assistance. Customs Service launches a King Air out of Gitmo, because we had aircraft that we used to launch interdiction missions from Gitmo, in addition to undercover operations. They launch Jacksonville, a pilot from our Jacksonville Air Unit happened to be there. He uses the coordinates to find us. They call Southcom in Panama and go, hey, you guys got any Navy vessels or Coast Guard vessels in the area? Because they were out there. Obviously, back then, the drug war they were part of it. They were interdicting vessels and checking vessels out just like they do today. So at 8 o'clock in the morning, Joe wakes me up. I'm kind of sitting on deck, bobbing up and down, and he goes, Nick, a great Navy Grey Hull's here. Number 57, I think it's the Blakely. He calls the captain on the radio. They send over a damage control party. They're in 2 Zodiac boats, loaded with all, I don't know how these boats floated with all the gear they had. They come on board. We had to pull them up on board because our boat was rather high out of the water. And they spent about, I don't know, a couple of hours in the hot sun. They seal us dry. They reseal the forward. First, they pump us dry, and then they reseal it. So we got to help the Navy back into their 2 Zodiac boats with all their gear. And as you're leaving, one of the sailors turns around and says, give them hell. And I go, look at it, no problem. Salute them. And they take off. And as we leave, I can hear John Paul Jones going, we have, not just begun to fight, and we're still in the game. We can make it. We have to make an unrep with the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Seneca, which was from Boston on patrol in that area, 70 miles from the pickup point off the coast of Columbia. We make it on time. Coast Guard does their unreps different than the Navy. The Coast Guard fires the line to you. You have to pull the line through the water. It's got they put plastic over the freshwater line and the fuel line. You got to hook it in, do each one, and then send it back in. And they sent an officer over, and we discussed the game plan because they were going to stay 50 miles away from us in case we needed help.
So for my listeners who are land guys, an unrep is an underway replenishment. You're getting fresh water, you're getting fuel, you're getting what you need to keep driving on.
Correct.
Got it.
The Navy does it different. The Navy does it, they pull up right next to you and they drop the hoses over the side and make it a little easier. The Coast Guard does it, firing the line to you and you got to catch it, whatever. It's just the way they do it. But we were happy to get the fuel in the water. Because when you took a shower, Joe Goulet would bang on the door. No Hollywood showers, got to get in and get out because we had limited supply of fresh water. So we make the Seneca rendezvous, get fuel, water. June 13th, 1990. We arrive at sunset off the coast of Colombia at the right coordinates. Joe Goulet turns around to me and says, "Congratulations, Nicky. Welcome to Colombia." Throttle back and get on the radio. Pluto, Pluto, this is Popeye. Pluto, Pluto, this is Popeye. Nothing. Oh, okay, this is not working out too good. My Cuban informant comes over to me and says, "Nicky, let me have the radio." Okay, give him the radio. He gets on in Spanish. Next thing I know, there's Pluto. We're on the air together. He says, "We're on the way. These guys are panicking. They can't find the boat. Now it's dark out. It's calm. The sea's calmed down quite a bit. There was no storm or no rain." Joe Goulet saved the day. He puts a spotlight on and shoots it straight up in the sky, searchlight. I hear them go, I call the bad guy Aldo. He's a fugitive wanted in Miami. That's how much he liked it in Colombia. He wanted to come back to Miami and just get arrested. So he's on the boat and he goes, "I see the light. I see the light. We're on the way." They get there, and for some strange reason, these guys are like on a lifeboat from the Andrea Doria. I don't know how they're 12 miles offshore, and this thing with like a little motor off the back. And I see the load on board, and they go to the stern. Well, our engines were on because we kept drifting, making sure we didn't drift across the 12-mile line and get jammed up. So we kept pulling back, and you needed the engines on to do this kind of stuff. So the engines were always on, even if they weren't turning. What do? They put the first package on board, 25 kilos. They go to put the second package on board, kaplunk, it goes in the ocean. I said, "We didn't come all this way for 25 keys of coke." So now we're running with flashlights and showing them. They finally pick up, once again, Gordo, my Cuban informant, gets on the radio and tells the captain, "Come alongside." So he comes along on our starboard side. And Joe Goulet, again, comes to the rescue. We got deck line, and we make these hooks, and we're lowering this deck line because we're pretty high off the water, and we're pulling the coke up. They're tying it around the each kilo, 25 kilo package. Meanwhile, Aldo is trying to get on board this boat. He's going to walk on water to get on because he's had it with this. And they sent a young kid on board as an observer to see what was going on, and he was a little seasick. So every time Aldo stood up to come on the boat, I had to tell him, "Get back on the boat." I just said, "Not yet. I'll let you know when it's ready." So finally we get the load on board, let them two on board. Their guys take off and go back to shore. We turn around and head towards the Mona Passage in Puerto Rico. Now we got to live with this character for a couple of days, the two of them. I actually felt bad for the young kid. He was seasick. I laid him down on one of the nylon couches, gave him a gallon of water. I had my informant translate to him, keep hydrated, drink the water, calm down. We put a sheet over him because the Navy had us. And now the AC is like, you were in sweatshirts at night. The Navy did such a great job with the AC. So we got him recovered because, he's the enemy, but still he's a person. And it would have been a real hassle if he got sick. What are we going to do then? The operation would come to an end. So I got to save him for selfish reasons. So we're heading back, and Aldo wants to take a shower. Fine, take a shower. And then he asked me for cigarettes, which is kind of an off story. So I give him a carton of cigarettes, but he doesn't like the brand. So I take the carton and shove it in his chest. And I said, "The next time we stop at a convenience store, I'll get you a carton of, whatever you like to smoke. This is it." He was just a pain in the ass. But anyway, he liked the show. And at one point he's telling us, "Get me to a phone. We get home. I'm going to get you guys 2,000 kilos, blah, blah, blah." Yeah, okay, fine. That's not going to happen, but I'm not going to tell you that. So we get to the Mona Passage off the coast of Puerto Rico. and it's very choppy. I end up losing a baseball cap over the side of the boat. Here comes our seaplane. They can't land. It's too choppy. So now we have to make it to the Bay of Maguays. Rough ride, very rough ride. We get there, seaplane lands in, take the Zodiac boat, and everybody loads on board. We get the cocaine on board. We get the two bad guys on board. Me and my partner, Chuck, we get on board with our informant, Gordo. Everybody's on board, shut the door, say goodbye to Joe and the boys and the crew from the undercover vessel. And we take forever to take off because we're really overloaded.
I was going to ask, were you guys at capacity? It sounds like you're over capacity.
Yeah, we're so over capacity and we're so heavy that I thought we were just going to kind of skim the ocean back to Florida. And it took a long time. It was like one of those deals where you'd break the surface and then go back down again. And I'm going, oh, this is, who are we going to throw off this plane to get, to make this mission go? So thank God it's sunset when we get to coast. Now we're being followed by customs aircraft. God forbid something happened to us or whatever. So we have plenty of help nearby. We get close to the coastline, and Aldo likes to come into the cockpit, and it's a 4-position cockpit: pilot, co-pilot, radio man, and engineers. So I'm sitting behind the pilot. He comes in, and I said, "Listen, I can't tell him we're landing in Dade County,
right?
Because he'd have a stroke."
Right. Well, he still thinks you guys are on the same team. He doesn't know what's going on.
Right, and Miami. Every smuggler in the world knew that Miami was a no-go zone. If you flew into Miami in 1990, you had to be insane, because customs air ops would be all over you like white on rice. It's just the way it was. I said, look, and that's Louisiana. We pay by the number of people on board this plane and the load size. You two are costing us money. So what I need you to do is I need you to go into there was 2 bathrooms in the back of the aircraft. I need you to go back there. I'll give you a gallon of water because it's hot. And just stay there until we take off, because if they see you, you're paying. Okay, no problem. So I bring him back to the head, lock him in. And before we took off, we planned this. We put tape over the window that was back where the head was, so they couldn't look outside and see where we were.
Right.
So we learned as we went along. We figured out, what would the bad guys do and how would we react if we were in their shoes. So anyway, it worked out fine. Gave him a gallon of water, locked the door. We landed in Dade County, and our folks were there to meet us. We refueled the aircraft, and Pat Roach, who later becomes my partner after this mission, who was the one who took me in to see the SAC to start this thing off. He's standing there with this crate of hero sandwiches, also known as hoagies in the South. And he says, here you go, it's food for the trip. And then Captain Video comes over and says, well, we have a little bit of a problem. He goes, we have a fuel leak in the left float. He goes, I need a bar of soap. And I go, wait a minute, you're telling me that this whole mission right now rests on whether or not we can get a bar? He goes, preferably ivory. I go, are you serious? I go, does NASA do this stuff for the space shuttle? So the gambler, who was used to our antics, said, where do you think we learned this trick? We got it from NASA. So Pat Roach runs into the undercover office that was nearby this place where we refueled, grabs a bar of soap, comes out, and there's Captain Video rubbing this soap against this kind of corroded part of the float where you could see some fuel could leak out.
Right.
So we take off. I mean, if this was the Air Force, this operation would have been shut down. I mean, the military wouldn't play by these rules, but we were just, after a year, we were determined we're making this work, or we're blowing up over Miami, one way or the other. We take off, and I got my headset on. I'm sitting behind Captain Video, and he goes, Nick, look to your left. And I look to my left, and I see fuel just streaming out. The soap didn't work that well. So we drained the tank real quick. I guess it's an EPA violation, but whatever. It's a long time afterwards to get in trouble for it. We fly cross country, land in Hobbs, Texas, and there's more customs people on the ground. I hear a citation whooshing above us, and the King Air landed, got refueled, and then we're flying cross country again, 4,000 feet. So
wow.
So folks know, 4,500 feet. When we went operational, the FAA was phenomenal. We flew with the same basic rules as the military. So if an 14 could fly at 200 feet above a highway for some reason, so could we. So when we launched, we used the same call signs as Uncle Sam military aircraft.
Tracking.
And they would clear the way for us, get aircraft out of the way, or let us know that there's somebody, 2 miles due east of your position, keep your eye out for them. So we're flying across, we land, we get to New Mexico, we get the word, there's the strip, and it's a dirt road in the middle of the desert, a mining road. See mesquite trees and whatever, arroyo, a ditch with no water in it, they're all over the place. So we go, and it's uphill. And we never landed uphill before. So well, we never used a boat and a plane and pick up a load either. So this is a first. So we land uphill, turn around, come back down, and Aldo, my royal pain in the ass for the entire operation, decides that he's going to give orders now. I wanted to physically throw him off the plane into the desert, but I just had some stern words with him, and I said, look, just play the game, okay? Everything's worked out fine so far. Get off the plane. And Jim, the special agent from New Mexico, shows up in his undercover car. The salesman gets off. Now we have no co-pilot. And they take off with Aldo and the young kid who was like the observer, the seasick kid. So once they leave, a rider truck shows up. A bunch of agents come out of the desert with rifles and, camo gear on. And they were just there to protect us. And we go to unload the plane, and they go, no, you guys did a lot. We'll take care of unloading it. So we're basically standing around, just hanging out, figuring out we're done with this part of this mission. And one of the younger agents looks up and says, you flew all the way from Florida to Colombia and out here in this thing? Because it was like mismatched paint, and it looked like, Terry and the Pirates. It was nasty. And it was a short wing version, which I'll get to later on. It wasn't the long wing version. So the plane gets offloaded, and they said, well, you can't leave the plane here. I said, well, where the hell are we going to go? They said, well, you got to go to Santa Fe. I said, where the hell is Santa Fe? They said, that away. So I get in a co-pilot seat with Captain Video. We take off, and we fly to Santa Fe, land in an FBO. I tell the nice ladies inside that we're using the plane for a beer commercial. And I guess they bought it. And they're coming out with their red carpet, like everybody else. When the jets come in, all these like rich folks with their high-end aircraft. And here we come in there with this Vietnam vintage Warbird with mismatched colored, paint on it. It looks like it survived 2 crash landings. And we leave it there. Some agents pick us up, and the delivery is made, and everything goes down smoothly. The bad guys pay, and as soon as the money comes in, they get arrested. And we go to the airport and get the plane ready to fly home. And if we have time, I'll go into it. If we don't have time, we can kick it off at the next. It's up to you.
No, that what you just laid out itself is fascinating. Was this the only time you guys did a seaborne operation like this, or did this get added to the kit bag?
I made 2 other boat trips with Joe Goulet and his crew to the coast of Colombia, and I got hurt really bad on the last trip, so bad that I was literally paralyzed for 4 days.
Oh my gosh!
I was repeatedly smashed against a steel bulkhead during a really bad storm at sea when I went down below. And it was like the cartoon when you see the floor go out,
right?
And characters like in the air, and then you fall down, and then I get hurled backwards, and then I get hurled forward. And this happened 2 or 3 times. And the next thing I know, I can't walk. So when things calm down, we end up meeting with a Navy missile cruiser, not the Blakely, another one. And a pharmacist mate comes on board. I'm down below because it was a 2-deck vessel. So I'm down below laying on a couch, on this vinyl couch. I can't make it to my bunk. And I don't know what he gave me. I don't remember, even if he told me, but I was knocked out for 4 days. And when I woke up one night, I said, I heard the storm at sea again. I said, look, I got to get topside in case this thing starts to sink. I'm going to drown down here. So there was a ladder not far from where I was sleeping and knocked out, and I tried to limp over to it, and I couldn't pull myself up the ladder.
Oh my goodness!
So it was in bad shape, and I probably should have been medevaced onto the Navy vessel, but I didn't want to leave the crew. and taken to Gitmo or wherever the Navy was going to take their ship, and then flown home. But that was a really bad injury. So after the third trip, there was a fourth one coming up, and they said, "Nick, you're going." And I said, "No, if I go, I won't be married. I'll lose my wife and kids. It's a game over." I said, I'll do the air stuff, but this boat thing, I'm limping around as it is. My wife thinks I'm insane. So, and something happened between the time that I went on this boat trip after the mission I just discussed ended, when we had an in-flight emergency.
Oh my goodness. So just a high adventure from start to finish, it sounds like. So basically after a couple more boat trips, air operations became your primary focus once again. Tracking. So I think this is a great place to leave it. This was an exciting interlude, if you will, just and a look into just how comprehensive an operation you guys built, because now you are, literally a sea, air, land special operations capable customs outfit here, and especially your integration with Coast Guard and with DoD. I mean, it's fascinating the level of coordination and integration that you guys are able to achieve, especially on the fly. Because the one thing you said that shocked me was how ground level everything was. Now, in my experience, higher headquarters and staffs, as much as people like to bitch about them, on the whole, exist to equip and enable the subordinate elements to execute a mission. They try not to get in the way. It does not sound like you had that level of support from your headquarters.
No, special agent in charge in Miami, he went to bat for us. And our group soup and our ASAC, and they would get us clearance, and they would argue to get us clearance. But it stopped there. Equipment wise, it was on us. If I went home one day and said, I'm not doing this anymore, and no one else wanted to do it, it would be over. There'd be no covert air and marine operations. I mean, maybe the Marine guys would be doing their thing. There were Marine operations going on.
Certainly.
But nobody was twisting my arm. That working undercover, being an undercover back then was like being a stand-up comic in a place where the audience gets to kill you if your jokes aren't funny.
Oh my gosh.
So it was very serious stuff, and it was strictly voluntary, and they knew it. But it would have been a little helpful. We didn't even go to undercover school till 1991.
Which is amazing to me as well. And why even bother at that point? You guys should be
Yeah.
teaching at the undercover school after 3-4 years of doing this.
Yeah, that's like sending guys to an SF unit, and having to be in combat for two years, and then going, hey, I think we should send him to SF training. Near and done that. So they had 24 of us in undercover school looking at each other, going like, when are we going to lunch?
I can only imagine. The one thing that's that I'm kind of extrapolating from what you're saying there, which is fascinating, is get drugs off the street. Got it. Prevent bad things from coming into the country. That sounds like the extent of the strategy. And you guys were not operating under a comprehensive strategy, doing a series of operations that kind of mutually enforced each other. It sounds like you guys were just picking up targets of opportunity and doing what you could tactically, with absolutely no integrated strategy coming from your headquarters or your leadership. That blows my mind.
Yeah, it was targets of opportunity. It was like going fishing by yourself or with your buddies, and you get a hit. Oh yeah, guess what? We have fish tonight.
Wow.
And then the word would spread, and then other raids. That's why I was getting phone calls at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, because the word would spread, and other agents would go, hey, I got a CI that could pick up a load in Colombia, but I have no way to do it. Call the Miami guys.
Gotcha. Good deal. Well, I'm really excited for the next time, after we've had this maritime interlude, to kind of come to the exciting climax of what you guys were doing in air operations going into the early 90s. Because we're in 1990 now.
1990, June
1990. And you did this through what, 93?
Yes, March or May. I have the date. I'll put it on the next show, March or May.
Well, fantastic. Well, so everybody, it's been Ben Powers coming at you with the Commander's Voice. We got one more visit with Mr. Nick Jacobellis. Another exciting story, another piece of the puzzle on how operations were conducted back in the late 80s, early 90s on the front lines of the drug war. So, Nick, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show, man, and I can't wait to have you back.
Take care. Take care, Ben. Thank you so much. See you next time.